So, last week, if you remember, kind of had a few moments right before the sermon where I didn't quite know what to do. And so I just did what I had planned to do. And then also found on Monday that we serve a funny, funny God, because the text that we're using for this Sunday is perfectly fitting to what I wanted to do last Sunday. So, before we really get into it, there's a few things I need your help with. I need you to, as best of your ability, hear everything that I say. The problem with that is that your brain processes words faster than I can say words, and so I say words, your brain has processed what I said and is waiting for me to say something else, gets bored and starts looking for squirrels. So, we need to try to really pay attention and focus on everything that I'm saying, because I also need you to understand everything in the context of everything else that I say. Because I'm going to be saying things that, if taken out of context, might not make a whole lot of sense, or might stir up some issues inside of you. So I really need you to understand the context of what we're saying, and the context of what is being said. Because one of the things that we're facing right now is we're facing a lot of issues in our country. We're facing a lot of issues in our churches. And the questions are being asked, well, what is our responsibility as the church? Who are we supposed to be? What side are we supposed to be on? And so I recall about a year ago, I went to a pastor's appreciation banquet that was done by Fish, and I think 1220, and Tony Evans was the speaker. And this was right after Michael Brelo's verdict came down. And he said that as the church, it's not our job to be Republican or Democrat. It's not our job to be black or white. It's not our job to be Black Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter. So, because these are fights that are happening. And God has called us, and God has sent us to be the officials in the fight, not to be taking a side. So we're here to be making sure that the game is being played fairly and honestly, and that neither side is cheating. But today, we're going to talk about a side that we need to take, because there is a side that we need to be on. So I want to paint a few pictures today as we go through, and I need you to really try to stay with me and understand where we're going. Because we live in a time where things are happening that we don't quite understand. I am not, and I know some of you might start to believe this, I am not un-American. I do not hate the United States of America. I don't think that we should just give up on the dream that is America. But I have been very critical of our country. I might even remove the flag, and got some trouble for that. But I believe in America. I believe in the church, and I've also been very critical of the church. And some of you may make you feel uncomfortable, but I think it's our job and our responsibility to be critical. Because it's only when we become critical and we look at what we're doing wrong do we begin to fix it. And if we're constantly standing around saying, this is how great we are, and this is everything we do right, and we never say, where have we messed up, where have we made mistakes, nothing gets done. And so a lot of people don't like the fact that our president is going around saying we've messed up. And they get really mad at him for that. But it takes a really, really enlightened person to be able to look at their own country, their own church, and say, we're not perfect. We make mistakes. And we're sorry for the mistakes that we've made. I believe in my heart, I believe that America is the greatest country to have ever existed. I believe that America is the greatest force for freedom and for good and for justice and for morality that's ever stood. I spent 8.5 years of my life serving that flag. Went to a combat zone to protect that flag because I believe those things. And so when I hear somebody stand up and say, let's make America great again, I can get behind that. Because I also recognize that we're not as great as we used to be. And so when I look at where we're at today, and we're not as great as we used to be, and somebody comes along and says, let's make America great again, we can buy into that. We can believe in that. We can get behind the slogan. The problem is who's the slogan's attached to. But that's another topic for another day. But what we have to recognize and understand is that when a huge population of our country hears, let's make America great again, they have no idea what you're talking about. They have no clue what you mean by that. They're saying, when was America great to begin with? And they ask the questions. Was America great when they stole our land, murdered our people, stripped us of our culture, forced us to live on unfertile plots of land? Another people group will say, was America great when they came to our home and they ripped us away from our families and our villages, forced us to come here as slaves, beat us and whipped us, brought us like dogs? Was America great when I was classified as 3/5 human? Was America great when I was separate but equal? Then you have another people group. Was America great when it deemed that I was too stupid to vote and that my place was the kitchen? I wasn't able to make the same wage as a man just because I was a woman. Was that the America that you're talking about? And so we have to recognize and understand that yes, we have done a lot of great things as a country, but we've also done a lot of really bad things. And when we say, let's make America great again, those same people are sitting there saying, what are you talking about? Because finally, America is starting to become great. Finally, things are starting to happen. Finally, civil rights that we have enjoyed for the existence of America are finally being made available to all the citizens of America. And so we need to recognize and understand that not everybody sees things the way that we see things. So what do we do about this? Where do we come out on these issues? Luckily for us, we have the Word of God.
Amen.
So Ecclesiastes chapter 4 begins. Solomon writes, then I looked again at all the acts of oppression which were being done under the sun, and behold, I saw the tears of the oppressed, and that they had no one to comfort them. And on the other side of their oppressors was power, but they had no one to comfort them. So I congratulated the dead, who were already dead, more than the living who are still living. But better off than both of them is the one who has never existed, who has never seen the evil activity that is done under the sun. So, as always, Solomon is pointing out a very, very bright and shiny existence that we have, right? He's kind of the Debbie Downer of the Bible. But one of the things that he points out that's very clear is that oppression is evil. And so any form of oppression is evil. Our job as Christians is to stand up and fight against evil. I don't think anybody can disagree with me on that statement. So we have to first recognize and understand that oppression is happening and has happened in our country. Before we go any further, I need to define a few terms that I'm going to be using, because I think they're two terms that are commonly misunderstood. The first term I think we need to define is the term racism, because a lot of us don't really know and understand what racism is. Racism is a system that is built upon holding people down based upon race. Okay? So the key to being racist is that you have to be able to be in power to enact rules and laws and regulations that are going to hurt people based upon their race. Okay? So we sitting here in this room, we are not racist. Why? Because we're not in power. We don't, as individuals, we don't have power to be racist. Okay? In order to be racist, you have to have power. Okay? However, the other word is prejudice. And all of us have prejudice in some way, shape, or form. Prejudice is when you prejudge something in a negative way. So an example, I don't like broccoli. I've never tasted broccoli. I've never eaten broccoli. I don't eat things with broccoli in it, but I don't like it. That's prejudice. And so that's why I can say we're all prejudiced. Because we all have things we don't like, right? Some of us just look at somebody and we just start judging them in a negative way. That's prejudice. These things exist. So when we talk about racial prejudice, yes. So recently I was listening to a podcast and it was broken down for me in this way, and I'm not making a political statement, but they say when Donald Trump gets up and says, I'm not racist, he's not lying. Because he doesn't have power. He's prejudiced, and when he becomes president, now he's racist. Because he has said, I'm not making this up, he said it, he's going to make laws that are going to ban people from coming to the United States of America based upon their race. Okay? And so that is racist. Now it's prejudice. Okay? So I'm not making a political statement, just making an example of what we mean by these systems. Okay? And so that same podcast I mentioned, it's the Litigious Podcast, episode 34, titled Black and White Racism in America. I suggest all of you listen to it. You might not agree with a lot of it, but it's honest and it's real. Okay? So one of the things that they said, there's a guy on the panel, and he's a white guy, and he says, we need to recognize that racism is a white problem. And at first I didn't really understand what he meant by racism is a white problem. But the more I thought about it, the more I understood it, is it's our problem because it's up to us to fix it. Because we have the power. Okay, we have a black president, great, but the majority of the Senate, the majority of Congress, the majority of our governors, the majority of our state and local representatives, they're white. We are still the majority, we are still in power. And so we need to stand up and say, where's our system broke and what can we be doing better? You may disagree with this, but lucky for me, I have history on my side. So we have the 1960s in the South. Okay, so we have these dumb black kids who are just wanting to do things like sit in a cafe and eat a piece of pie or sit in the front of the bus or vote. I mean, come on, man, seriously. How dumb can you be to want to do such things that everybody else can do? And so they began to protest. And the police show up, and the police are dragging them out, beating them, sicking the dogs on them, shooting them with water cannons, lynching them, throwing them in jail, murdering them. And we read about it in the newspaper, but we read about these riots that were occurring and how the police came to instill law and order. And law and order was reinstilled because these cops had killed the riots. But the protesters are saying that that's not what happened. That's not what happened. And so one day a reporter from the north decided that they wanted to find out what was really going on in the South. And so they took a news crew down with them. And they began filming the protests. And they began seeing what was really happening. And so now we're at home, and we're seeing this on the news. We're seeing that what the cops have been saying was happening wasn't happening. And what the black community and the protesters are saying was happening. And we became outraged. We said, this is absurd. How can we be allowing to have this to happen? This is America. This is the home of the free, the land of the brave. And so thousands and thousands of young white kids began to go down south. And they began to join in the protests. They began to join in the marching. They began to get dragged out of the cafes, getting beaten. They began to get bit by dogs. They began to be murdered, if you remember Mississippi, right alongside the black protesters. And guess what happened? Things changed. Because we as the dominant society said, this isn't right. Things need to change. And things changed, right? We had the Civil Rights Amendment, was that 64? The Voting Act of 65, don't quote me on the years. But things began to change. And we tend to remember in history that Martin Luther King was the leader of the Civil Rights Movement. Absolutely not. God was the leader of the Civil Rights Movement. He was in charge because it was successful. It got done what needed to get done. The problem that occurred is after that, we, as the dominant culture, began to write a narrative And the narrative is that we live in a post-racial society. Racism is over. And it became very uncool to be in social circles and say racist things. Because we couldn't be that way. We had to move past that. And so, in instances, sometimes we would have a black family move into our neighborhood, and everybody else didn't move out. I think it was in 1970, Tom Skinner said that during segregation, the North was integrated. But by integrated, it meant by the time the first black family moved into a neighborhood and the last white family moved out. Well, in the 70s, in our post-racial society, that stopped happening. But because of redlining, and if you don't know what redlining is, I suggest you look it up, only a couple black families would be allowed to buy property in certain neighborhoods. So we began to have one black family. This is where we came to the term, I'm not racist, I have a black friend. Right? And this is where our movies and our TV shows started portraying a token black character. Because that's what we knew. We knew one black family. I went to Amherst my entire life, and we always had one black kid in our school. It wasn't always the same one, but there was always one. He'd move out, and another one moved in. But there's always one. And so we began to see they would move into our neighborhoods, and this is the 70s, so I'm not being sexist, but the dads would go to work together, and the moms would stay home and make pies together. Right? And so we'd be on the job working with them, and they're like, well, they're not so bad. Our kids would be playing together, and nothing bad happened. We'd have a barbecue, and they would come over, and we didn't care. Why? Well, A, they looked like us, they dressed like us, they acted like us. Racism was over. We liked these people. But what we didn't see is we didn't see what was happening in the parts of town that we didn't go to. The parts of town we didn't drive by. We didn't hear about. These are the areas that have been reverse redlined. Once again, don't know it, look it up. It's important. Okay? And so what you have is, you have a population the size of a quarter forced to live on an area the size of a dime. And so there's a lot of crime. There's a lot of things happening. But we don't know about it, we don't hear about it, we don't have to see about it. Racism is over because I have a black friend. And he came to my house the other day, and I was nice to him. I'm not racist. But once again, we didn't understand what the word meant. And so what began to happen in those neighborhoods was a lot of oppression, a lot of racism. And we say, well, they just need to work harder. They just need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. Well, Tom Skinner said, is it possible to pull yourself up by the bootstraps when somebody keeps cutting the straps? And we can get into some examples of that, but once again, we're limited on time. So things began to happen in these neighborhoods, and we didn't hear about it. Then one comes as 91 or 92. Rodney King's running from the police. Well, somebody knows what's about to happen when that chase ends, because it happens there every single day. And they're tired of people not believing them. So they get out their camcorder and they record it. And guess what? We're outraged. We're outraged that this had happened. But then the narrative comes out, he was a criminal, he was on angel dust, and we say, well, it's okay. Cops are just doing their job. But what we didn't realize, what we thought was, that was an isolated incident. And their community is standing up saying, this isn't an isolated incident. This happens every single day in our neighborhood. This happens every day. So when the cops are found innocent, they just cannot contain themselves anymore. And we have the riots. But now we have the evidence we need to say, see what they do? It's all them. That's why we don't go to those neighborhoods. That's why we don't associate with them, because they're the bad ones. That's why we put them away in the ghettos, so we don't have to deal with them. And then we stopped hearing about it. Right? We stopped hearing about it again. And then, all of a sudden, black people start getting shot by the police. And it starts being on the news every night. And once again, we're outraged by this. And once again, we are mad. So right, we have us, well, some of us, I guess not all of us in this room, some of us right-wingers, we see this, we're so mad at the media. We're so tired of the media pitting us against each other. Media is keeping racism alive. Why is the media doing this? Why do they keep reporting on these stories. Then you have the other side that's saying, it's about time they start reporting on these stories. This happens every day. These aren't isolated incidents. Michael Garner, Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray, Alton Sterling, Fernando Castillo, Michael Brown. These aren't isolated incidents, and they're not isolated to one specific area of the country. They're happening everywhere. This week, a behavioral therapist laying on the street with his hands up. Autistic child playing with a truck right in front of him. Gets shot. Cop says, it was an accident, I meant to shoot the kid. Why is that any better? Okay, so think about this. Think about this. This is the statement that the union puts out. Think about how this is better. So not only were you trying to shoot a special needs child playing with a truck, but you missed and hit the guy with his hands up laying on the street like this? So no part of that story is better for you. But at the scene, the guy who was shot asked the cop, "Why'd you shoot me?" He said, "I don't know." The other officers on the scene said, "Man, why'd you shoot him?" "I don't know." Please understand, I am not against the police. I love the police. I am never signing up to do that job. I do not believe that police are racist. I do not believe there's ever in the history of this country been a cop wake up and say, "I hope I get to shoot a black kid today." Okay? Never once in the history of this time do they wake up and say, I'm going to go hunting in the ghetto and hope I get to catch one today. That doesn't happen. These are all accidents that come out of fear of not knowing what's about to happen, because we're taught that this community of people in these neighborhoods, they're a threat. And so they go in with guns already out. Hey, why are you hiding behind telephone poles with your guns out in the first place when there's a teacher trying to get a student to calm down who's having a fit of autism? And if anybody's ever been around autistic kids, we know how those fits can be. But yet the police show up because the patient and the worker are both black. Now they're hiding behind telephone poles with guns drawn while this kid's sitting there playing with a toy truck. Okay? So we have to understand, they're not going there to shoot them. But because of fear and because of the perception of a threat, they do. So this happens. We need to start understanding, why is this happening? These things need to be reported on. We need to hear about them so we can fix it. Then we have this theory, work hard, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. What a lie. What a lie. I am who I am today because of government handouts. Because I took advantage of government programs to get me to where I am. That's not pulling myself up by the bootstraps. That's somebody giving me a handout. Not a handout. Somebody came alongside of me and they helped me. There were systems in place for me to benefit. So we need to recognize is that not all of us start at the same point in life. And this is clear to us when we see the kid who has a rich family and they send him to better schools and he gets into a better college, right? And he gets a really good job. And so secularly we say, man, he's really successful, but it wasn't fair because, he came from wealth and I didn't. He had an advantage that I didn't have. So remember last week we talked about person A and person B. The difference between person A and person B was person A was further ahead. They had a farther ahead starting point than person B. And so we need to recognize that there's an entire culture in our country that's starting way behind us. Paint a picture, as I like to do. You have a 15-year-old girl. She reads at a 4th grade reading level. She is pregnant. Drops out of school. Now her son's in the 6th grade and he's reading at the 1st grade at the reading level. And we say he just needs to work harder. He just needs to apply himself more. Plus, it doesn't matter because in a few years he's going to drop out, become a gangbanger, and start selling drugs, and probably end up dead in a drive-by anyway, so who cares? His life doesn't matter. Well, if we understand schools, we go to school, especially K through 3rd grade, you learn how to read. 4th grade through 12th grade, you read to learn. So if you get into 4th grade and you don't know how to read, every day you're falling farther and farther behind. Every day. hopefully mom and dad are there to help us learn how to read. It's not the school's job to teach you how to read. It's the school's job to give you the tools you need to learn how to read. And so obviously when you're K through 3, mom and dad need to be coming home from work, sitting you down, helping you with your homework, teaching you how to read, teaching you how to count, teaching you how to add. So that way when you get into 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, your teacher can say, you need to read chapters 12 and chapters 13. There's going to be a test on Friday. And you can go home and you know how to learn that material. Because you've been taught how to read. So you can go home and you know how to study because mom and dad were there teaching you how to study. So when you have a 6th grade reading and a 1st grade reading level, why? Mom don't know how to read. How is she going to teach him how to read? And we blame them. We blame the schools. Which, the schools can only do so much. You only have so much time with these kids. And so we need to recognize that this 6th grade boy reading at a 1st grade reading level that I personally worked with, that I spent 2 years of my life teaching him how to read. By the time I got done, he was a 7th grader reading at a 4th grade reading level. So, once again, I'm not telling you a generic story. I'm telling you a story that I witnessed. I understand that this isn't everybody, and this isn't every situation. This is one situation. But it happens a lot. The amazing thing is that some of these kids that come out of the situation I just described, they do learn how to read. And they do make it, they do get it out. They do work hard enough. That is a miracle. But we need to recognize and understand that that whole system is being oppressed. This week I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine. We were talking about some of these issues, racism and white supremacy and white fragility. And he's, I would say he's like me on the right wing, but I guess I can't really say I'm right wing anymore. I'm still way too liberal to be conservative, but I'm still way too conservative to be liberal. So I'm just right in the middle, probably right where God is. But so he's a little more right-wing guy, and we're having this conversation. He says, Tony Evans gave a sermon last week about this, and it was really good. I really think you should listen to it. And I did. And I recommend you looking it up, the sermon last week. Phenomenal. Tony Evans is probably one of my favorite preachers. Probably a close second to Tom Skinner, his mentor, who is probably my favorite preacher. But he says that under God's umbrella, we need to recognize that under God's umbrella, all life matters. All life. But then under God's umbrella, we have to recognize that the unborn life matters. Why? Because there's a huge percentage of our population that doesn't believe the life of the unborn matters. So we need people to stand up and fight and say, the life of the unborn matters. Then we need people to stand up. Now, I do not support the Black Lives Matter movement. Black Lives Matter movement. I don't support the movement. Why? I can't support any movement that's not specifically designed to bring about the kingdom of God. Okay? So, but I do understand what they're doing. And I understand why they're doing it. But the purpose isn't to proclaim Jesus Christ. And so that's one of the reasons why I can't necessarily support it. But I can understand it. Because there's a huge population that looks at these kids and say their lives don't matter. We don't have to worry about them. So now we have a movement stepping up saying, Black lives do matter. And this movement is needed in our country because there's a huge population of our country that believes their lives don't matter. Just keep them in the ghetto. Listen, hundreds of thousands of them are being shot and killed every single day. But we don't ever change the gun laws. Why don't we change the gun laws? Because A, they were drug dealers and gangbangers anyway, so they're criminals. And their guns were illegally bought, so they're illegal guns, and criminals are always going to have guns. We don't need to do anything about it. Well, then you have a guy with an assault rifle walk into a nightclub and he kills 50 people. We don't need to change the gun laws. Why? Because they were gay. Their life doesn't matter. You have a guy go up and shoot a congresswoman in the head. We don't need to change any of the gun laws. Why? She's a woman. Her life doesn't matter. And on top of that, she's a Democrat. Her life definitely doesn't matter. We're not changing any laws for them. But we when you have a white man who's Republican and president, and he gets shot, all the gun laws change. We get the Brady Bill. Why? Because his life matters. We're willing to change the law for a life that matters. So we need to recognize that all life matters. Tony Evans also said one thing that really stuck out to me. He says we cannot define ourselves as white Christians, or black Christians, or conservative Christians, or liberal Christians. Because when you put an adjective in front of a noun, the adjective then drives the noun. So now, if I say I'm a white Christian, my Christianity is being driven by me being white. If I say I'm a conservative Christian, well now my Christianity is being driven by my political agenda. I prefer my faith be driven by the Word of God.
Exactly.
Not what Paul Weyrich and the moral majority say my faith should be driven by. That's a whole other story for another day. So what do we do about this? Where does this come from? And what is the point? And how does this all tie into Ecclesiastes 4? Tom Skinner once said, talking to a group of black guys, we get mad at the cop that busts our head, but we don't recognize that he's the one who's really oppressed. Because he has somebody over him who's holding him down, making him act that way. Who in that guy has somebody over him who's making him act that way. Well, that's Tom Skinner. What does the Word of God say? The Word of God says, as if you see oppression of the poor and denial of justice and righteousness in the province, do not be shocked at the sight. For one official watches over another official, and there are higher officials over them. So we recognize that there's oppression. But we have to recognize that the oppressor that's holding everybody under oppression is the prince of the power of the air. He's the oppressor, not God, but Satan. And every time I point out, that's assuming God. So when we see this oppression, we need to recognize, because Solomon says there's nobody to care for the oppressors. They have power, but nothing else. So we need to recognize and understand that they too need the liberator. They are just doing what they've been told. They're ruled out there as a world of oppression. It's a world of evil. Solomon says that all oppression in all forms is evil. So to ask the question at the very beginning, whose side are we going to be on? Because we have to pick one.
My own.
If ever you find your side on the side, if you find yourself on the side of the oppressor, you find yourself on Satan's team. Because in every situation, in every case, God is on the side of the oppressed. God is on the side of the oppressed. Luckily for us who are in this room, hopefully you've accepted the fact that you have a liberator, that Jesus Christ came to liberate you from the slavery of Satan. Jesus Christ came to liberate you from the shackles of bondage that is the world. Because Satan's job, his desire is to keep us in oppression under him. And because of our oppression, why do bullies bully? Because they were bullied. So why are oppressors oppressing? Because they're being oppressed. So we need to recognize and understand that we need to pick a side. And whose side are we going to be on? Satan's side or God's side? We're going to play for Satan's team or God's team? Because if we're playing for God's team, we always have to stand up and recognize that there's oppression. And it's our job to provide comfort for the oppressed. But we also need to recognize that they're all oppressed. If they do not have Jesus Christ in their life, they are being oppressed. And it's our job to share with them that the liberator has come. We need to recognize that this book right here is a story of liberation. It's a story of people who fell under oppression by a ruler or by Satan. And at the end, the liberator comes and sets them free. And we need to recognize that that's our position. We have been set free. What are we going to do with our freedom? Are we going to help others come and understand that freedom is at hand? They no longer need to live that way. We need to help and recognize that what's going on in our country right now is necessary. Because it's through these times that change happens. It's through these times that we get on board and God is able to move. If we just sit around and talk about how great everything is, we don't ever recognize that maybe God's trying to change something. Because the Catholic Church might be one of the only times in the history the Catholic Church was doing very, very well for herself. And in 1962, completely reformed their entire church. It wasn't broke, and they fixed it anyway. That doesn't normally happen. So in order for us to fix what's happening, we first need to recognize that there's some things that are broken. And it's our responsibility. So who are we as a church? What are we to be doing? We're to be fighting for God's team. And we're to be bringing a message of liberation and reconciliation to the world of the oppressed. Some people may not necessarily know how to take it when I say, I no longer consider myself a citizen of the United States of America. Why? Because I consider myself to be an alien, a foreigner, living in a foreign land, sent from the home office to be an ambassador for Christ with a ministry and a gospel of reconciliation that is desperately needed in a world of oppression. And you say, yes, but that's un-American. And I say, yes, but it's biblical. It's biblical. Paul writes that I am an ambassador for Christ. Paul writes that I am a foreigner living in a foreign land. It's time for us to stand up and say, we want to carry out God's agenda. Not the right-wing agenda, not the left-wing agenda, not the Black Lives Matter agenda. We want to carry out God's agenda. And we want to be on His team. And we want to be representative of His office. Things are happening in our world today. And He needs us to stand up. Slavery would have ended 200 years before it ended if the church would have stepped up and said, enough is enough. We're not going to allow this to happen. Segregation would have ended many years before. Segregation never would have began if the church would have stepped up and said, this isn't what God wants. The women's rights would have happened a long time ago. Women would have always had the right to vote if the church would have stepped up and said, this is not what God wants. We need to recognize and understand that there's something happening. And it's our responsibility to step up and say, what does God want to be done here? How can I be on God's team? How can I carry out His message? Let's pray. Father God, we thank you and praise you for the opportunity to be on your team. Lord, we are so grateful and thankful that our Liberator has come to set us free from the bondage that we found ourselves in from the world. Lord, we pray that we can help spread this message of liberation, that we can help bring reconciliation to a world of oppressed. Lord, we pray that we can be your ambassadors, and we find ourselves on your side always. We pray these things in Jesus' name.